Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's Building Stronger Communities Committee. I'm Councillor Jean Flaherty, chairing the meeting this evening, and with me on this digital meeting we have councillors and officers of the council. So because it's digital, I'm going to ask the councillors to introduce themselves, and I'll try to remember everybody's name as we go around. So by telephone we have Councillor Hannon.
Correct.
Councillor Wright.
Yes, hello.
Hi. And then on the screen I have Councillor Mike Biggin.
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor Joan Grime.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Joan Grime, Councillor for Culture, Glacebury and Croft.
Thank you, Joan. Councillor Sarah Hall.
Hi everybody, I'm Councillor for Busey and Whitecross.
Councillor Sharon Harris.
Hello, I'm Councillor for Appleton, Hatton, Stretton and High Walton.
Thank you, Sharon. I think that's all the councillors. I hope I haven't missed anybody. And now we have officers supporting us this evening. We have David Boyer.
Good evening.
Ian Brackenbury.
Good evening, I'm Ian Brackenbury, Operation and Commercial Services Manager for the Authority.
Thank you. We have Linda Smallthwaite.
Hello, I'm the Investigations and Enforcement Manager with Environmental Crime.
Good evening, Linda. We have Abigail Howell, who is looking after us this evening.
Hi, I'm Abigail Howell, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Abigail. And we have Jenny Caldwell looking after our technical side.
Yes, good evening, Jenny Caldwell from Democratic Services.
Thank you. I don't think I've missed anybody, so thank you very much, and once again good evening. So we'll start with our agenda now. So first of all, Abigail, have we any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, we have received apologies from Mr. David Littlewood. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. It's recorded. And can I please ask, under our code of conduct, are there any declarations of interest in any matters that are appearing on the agenda? Take the silence as a no. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting. Can we please ask if everybody is in agreement that the minutes are correct, and if you could message if there are any changes, and then we can speak about them. I'll take that there are no changes and the minutes are approved. Thank you. I'm now going to ask Ian Brackenbury and Linda Smallthwaite to give us an update on the changes in procedure regarding the prosecution of fly tippers. So please can I hand over to Ian and Linda? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask my colleague Linda, who's very kindly prepared a presentation for you this evening to give you some background information with regard to the current situation, with regard to environmental crime and in particular waste, to go through the presentation, and then we will be able to take any appropriate questions at the end of the presentation, if that's all right, Chair. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thank you very much. Evening, everybody. My name's Linda Smallthwaite, so I've spoken to some of you before when we've been face to face in different times, but as you know quite rightly this evening we are over digital media, so I'm sorry that it's not quite as interactive as it might otherwise be. Next slide, please. So just to give you a quick overview, and then to run through some other issues in more detail. From our perspective, clearly the COVID situation has taken its toll on the services because of the increased demand. You'll all be aware of increased waste issues, as well as the difficulties that we've had in respect of staffing, making sure that we're focusing on the right things with the right people. Taking that aside, we've also had quite a substantial amount of work that we've been doing in the background in relation to transformation. So from our perspective, certainly lots of Ian's team and me and my team have been focusing on trying to improve the situation for reporting and trying to make it easier, both for the public to complain to us about issues that arise, but also for us to be in a situation to get as much information out of every complaint that comes in so that we can deal with it as quickly and as reactively as possible. Clearly the two things going hand in hand, both the COVID situation and the transformation, has led to some issues in respect of response times and the amount of capacity we've got to deal with matters, but nevertheless we've worked really hard in the background, and we're really pleased the direction that we're going in. The other bullet points on this page now, I'll just run through the issues for those so that you've got an overview of those, and then I'll go through the bin policy and the abandoned bin project we've done, the positive recruitment situation that we're in at the moment, the contaminated bin pilot, the commercial waste project that we're planning, some DEFRA statistics to give you a view of what's happening in the local authorities around us, and then the approach going forward, which is the engage, educate and enforce. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So as you know, the situation in relation to fly tipping, in accordance with kind of the DEFRA statistics, this picture in the top left hand corner is what they typically define as a fly tip. That might not be what you or I would, or the residents would necessarily refer to as a fly tip, because generally any sort of waste that's left somewhere where we don't think it should be left, we call a fly tip. But that's not the same as how DEFRA define. So when we split it down into the different areas, we call it, so Waste Services and ourselves call it residential side waste when it's in the back alleyways. We might call it excess waste because it's not in the bin. But either way, side waste is generally what we find in back alleyways. It's not what we would be defining as accordance with the DEFRA explanation of fly tipping, which, as I say, is like that picture in the top left hand corner. Side waste is more likely to be classed as the bin bags that are in the picture, or waste that should be in the bin but isn't. We also have recurring issues with contaminated bins, where the wrong thing is in the bin, it goes nasty over a time period, it's not been collected by our colleagues in refuse, but equally we have those bins or other bins that are abandoned, and we also have the problem with bins being taken and bin fires. In addition, commercial waste can cause a problem, so making sure that all the commercial premises have got the right licences and that commercial waste is dealt with appropriately. But some of the wider issues that cause demand on our services that we need to massively reduce is no waste found. So we've got a massive problem with, by the time the officers get out to a job, the environmental crime officers get out to a job, the waste that's been reported actually isn't there. So I know that won't be the situation for a lot of the complaints that come across councillors' emails and phone calls, but for the officers themselves, we seem to have a massive demand on our time in relation to jobs where the waste is gone by the time the officer gets there. The next part to that is private land. So in addition, waste that is found on private land that understandably residents or councillors or who have businesses complain about, nobody realises that it's private land. So that causes an additional demand on council staff and council budgets, because we're having to clear with Ian's team private land. Sometimes the enforcement team want to leave waste there longer, not because we want anyone to have to look at waste for longer, but because we're trying to find somebody who is responsible to get to move it. And understandably, residents and councillors, you know, become upset that waste stays longer than we believe it should. We understand those frustrations completely, but it does create an additional demand on us that actually is private land. And if we can get hold of the landowner, or we can find the person who put it there, we will actually want them to remove it. And then the last thing is duplicate complaints. So clearly, the longer we have complaints open, or the longer we have waste in a position, the more likely we are to have duplicate complaints, which adds to the administrative burden of what we're trying to do. So that's just an initial flavour of where we're up to at the moment. Next slide, please. So I think the last time I came to speak to you, which must be some time ago now, because it was definitely pre-COVID, so we're over 12 months, if not 2 years maybe, we talked about using different mechanisms to deal with people who left waste where they shouldn't. So illegally. In essence, the fly tipping legislation is really difficult to get successful prosecutions. That's not to say that we don't, because we do. However, it is unusual for us to have somebody who actually sees the person leave the waste in the place where they leave it illegally and be prepared to give us a witness statement to say that. That means that we either have to find waste evidence within the waste that we can use to identify who might be connected with it so we can follow that up, or it means that we have to use other mechanisms. So a couple of years ago, David Boyer and Ian Brackenbury agreed that we could update the council bin policy, and we went through the waste board to get that done. These are the terms of the bin policy. So in essence, it controls how you can place your waste on the highway. Now, this is really important to us because whilst, as I said at the start, we all want to refer to things as fly tipping because it's waste and it's in the wrong place, we have to use these other mechanisms, and these other mechanisms require us to go through a process whereby we make sure individuals understand their responsibility under the bin policy. So we've been doing some work in relation to the bin policy that's been really successful. So next slide, please. So we've done a couple of ward waste projects now. We did a pilot a couple of years ago, maybe 12 months before we went into the COVID situation. And subsequently, we've done this project in Q4 of 2021. So there were 210 homes that we identified in a grouping where there were approximately 400 bins that were left in the alleyways. There was side waste and there was bulky waste as well. What we did was we hand delivered section 46 bin policy notices, which basically says, please can you comply with the bin policy? Here's a copy and this is why. Those notices were hand delivered to 210 homes, and as a result of that, 40% of the bins went in. We then had to go out again and do a reminder 3 weeks later, and another 30% of the bins went in. So 86 bins remained. So what we've got is we've got some stickers that are quite substantial that go over the lip of the bin. So it connects the top of the bin lid down to the bottom of the bin lid. So we can see if somebody's opened the bin again. So we can see whether it's been in use. So we can tell whether someone's trying to use it and just leaving it in the wrong place or not. 30 bins, mainly contaminated blue ones, were ultimately removed by Waste Services in conjunction with ourselves. There were actually only 2 requests for returns of bins, and cleansing came out and cleansed the area as well. The fly tipping complaints in that location dropped from approximately 3 a week to 0. Now, as you can see from that, it's been really successful. But it takes a lot of work to do that. It takes a number of repeat visits. Now it's beneficial because otherwise we'd be dealing with complaints. So we know this is where we want to get to, but where we've had the trouble is capacity. Next slide, please. So what we did was we spoke with our colleagues in neighbourhoods and asked for some temporary support in order to do some future work. We had a neighbourhoods officer who operated for half a day a week across a 4-month period. He hand delivered 2,800 letters. He maximised any opportunity for face-to-face doorstep contact. So if there was somebody in, he'd have a conversation with them, explain to them about what we were trying to do, explain to them about how we needed people to report so that we knew who to target, who to advise, who to educate, any barriers that were in the way that we could start to remove. As a result of just doing that work, that neighbourhoods officer identified 182 jobs from that location that they were passing by from their observations and from the discussions with individuals. resulted in investigation and removal by those responsible or from streets clearance. So obviously our aim is to reduce the number of times we ask streets to go and remove. We want the people who've put things in the wrong place to take it away, and we want to be in a position that if we can take legal action, or we need to take legal action, that the case is strong enough to do so. So just to give a snapshot of August, so 600 homes on their own were visited in August. There were 52 reported jobs. Some of those were repeated that were already in process with our area officer, but 52 jobs reported. 30 removal letters were posted and subsequently waste was removed, or there was no waste found on 20 of those cases. 7 other cases resulted in removal following our intervention. So that was either because of face-to-face intervention from one of our officers, or it was we contacted the private landowner, the landlord, or the letting agent. And in 71% of the cases, that resulted in the waste being removed. So that meant that we only actually sent 4 cases out of those 52 through to street services, proving to us that that was a real benefit, that we needed to really invest in the time to make that kind of work our norm, really, which is where we've always been aiming. Next slide, please. So enforcement. So again, partly a benefit from one of the lockdown situations. We were in a position to be able to use the equivalent of 1.5 full-time equivalent staff from my wider investigations team, so some skilled investigators from other areas who were able to undertake some what we would call desk-based environmental crime investigations. So if we had photographs of envelopes with names on, or medication containers with names and addresses on, we were able to follow that up using a desktop officer rather than the frontline environmental crime officers. So we resolved a load of situations that arose from that, either through letters, through phone calls, through notices going out to tenants or businesses, contact with social landlords or private landlords as appropriate. So we really managed to get quite a substantial amount of work done by those officers in a relatively short time period. So that resulted in 11 fixed penalty notices to the value of £2,200 plus 3 pending prosecutions at that time. One of those prosecutions, actually, somebody has been arrested and impaired in front of the bench today, and I'm just waiting for the results of the fines in relation to that. But it kind of goes to show that we are willing and very capable of taking prosecutions where we've got enough evidence to do so. The additional backlog was reduced as well, the burden on the officers, so it increased their wider productivity. But it was really beneficial to be able to see how skilled investigators could be able to thrash through quite a substantial amount of work in that time period. Next slide, please. In addition, we've got a contaminated bins pilot. So we've been reviewing the process between Ian Brackenbury's team and Steve Andrews in Waste, trying to look at repeated issues with contaminated bins. We're streamlining the process, we're looking at reducing delays in tackling individual issues, we're sharing data from central positions, so that really helps us to work reactively. We've got one of Ian's officers, the waste recycling officer, contacting people in the first instance. We're contacting social landlords in order to support tenants to tackle issues. Where we've got repeat issues, we'll be able to issue from environmental crime the section 46 letter and notice and go through that route, and then subsequent issues will be dealt with either accordingly through the bin policy and the community protection warnings and the community protection notices and penalties. Next slide, please. So just to give you a kind of overview in respect of the statistics across our local authority neighbours. So you'll see here that these are the DEFRA statistics. So again, just a reminder that this is the statistics that DEFRA require and class as fly tipping. They're not the kind of wider numbers. And this, of course, is only a percentage of the work that the environmental crime team do. It's not a situation whereby we've only had 838 complaints, let me assure you. So you can see the numbers in respect of North West region and the incidents per 1,000 people, and you can see how we are positioned next to those near neighbours. Okay, next slide, please. So going back to the recruitment issues that we talked of before. So in relation to the education and the enforcement support that we've had, we've been able to demonstrate the outcomes that we could make if we had additional staffing. So that additional staffing requirement has been granted. So we're taking on a grade 5 or 6 officer, and we're taking on a grade 8 senior investigation officer. So those jobs are out to advert at the moment. It puts us in a really, really strong position, probably the strongest position that we've been in. It's taken quite a long while to get us to a position where we can make sure we can make a proactive difference. It's fair to say that the officers have been overwhelmed with the level of work, and certainly COVID hasn't helped in the last 12 months, but it's been a real bonus that David Boyer's directorate are so supportive, and since Ian Brackenbury's come on board, it makes things considerably easier for us to try and work through issues together and come to some solutions in a much slicker way than maybe we have done before. It's been quite a lot of foundation work we've had to do, but we're in a really strong position now. And so, as I say, we've got jobs out to advert and they close on the 2nd of May, I think that is. So from our point of view, we'll be in a position to have the 3 environmental crime officers that we've got. We've also got that additional environmental crime senior investigators role, and we've also got an educational officer's role. So this is the route forward: the engage, educate and enforce. We get those people into post, and we'll be able to maximise the outcomes from the transformation process, and we'll also be able to look at engaging with the comms team so that we can proactively follow up and promote what we're trying to do. We can look at a project with social landlords. We can look at educating residents, landlords and businesses about the duties and responsibilities. We can look at schools messaging about trying to improve individuals across the borough's understanding of what we're trying to do. We certainly want to work on some of the central wards and support there with engagement and education work, and obviously look at commercial waste contracts. As I say, waste have been invaluable in the process, so we definitely want to continue working to streamline the processes we've got and look at projects and key issues and hotspots and start to really maximise that partnership working that we've got together. And then we'll be in a stronger position as well in relation to enforcement and looking at timely and reasonable enforcement that we want to do. We want to make sure that we've put all the steps in place and that we can take those valuable steps forward to tackle those that we need to tackle. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So again, my plea really for help always. We are a very small team. We at the moment, as I say, are 3 environmental crime officers, and it is a very large borough for 3 environmental crime officers. So we always need all your support and the resident support to try and complain through the warrington.gov.uk process wherever possible, to tell us who is responsible, who's likely to be. Frequently we don't get that information. We are told that waste has appeared, and then the concern there is that all we're doing is asking street services to remove waste, and the problem with that is that we just exacerbate the problem. Unless we can try and identify who's responsible, we're really struggling to take action. Observers, frequently we get people who say, yeah, I know who did it, but I'm not prepared to give you a witness statement. And that's really hard and very frustrating for, I'm sure you, when you've got residents who tell you they know who it is, but if they're not willing to give us a witness statement, it's not of evidential value. So it's really, really difficult and very frustrating. And then again, just to publicise the bin policy to help us so that people understand how they should be complying, and wherever possible to encourage people to number their bins. If we've got 10 bins out and there's no numbers on any of them, it takes quite a lot of effort to find out whose bins they are. If they're numbered, that is significantly less work for us all. I hope that gives you an overview. I hope that if you've got any questions, Ian or I will be able to assist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. That was great. Really, really obvious that you've made a lot of progress, I think, since last time we heard from you. So you've been using the time very productively. Has anybody got questions for Linda?
Yes, I've got one. If that Councillor Biggin, if that's okay.
Yes, Councillor Biggin, please.
Well, I mean, I understand there's an increasing problem, and I think there was a terrific report, by the way, and the structure that you set in place, absolutely right. But doesn't the problem start with access to the tips? I mean, I don't know at the present circumstances. I know it's been more difficult with the pandemic situation, but I do think that perhaps it's more difficult now, and perhaps not well publicised, how people can actually access the tips in Warrington.
I think I need to defer to Ian on that.
Yeah, I'll answer that one. Thank you, Councillor Biggin. I mean, obviously we've got the three household waste sites that are all operational in Warrington. I think the issue you potentially refer to is the allocation of vans and what would be considered larger vehicles going into the sites to deposit large items to try and manage and mitigate the illegal dumping of trade waste. We have a permit scheme in place that supports residents to take transit type vehicles and larger vehicles into Gateworth. A resident has to phone up prior to the visit to obtain a permit. Details of the waste that they are taking is recorded, and then a permit is granted to allow the resident to access the household waste facility. I mean, this is to try and manage the level of waste and volume of waste and the cost of disposal that the authority is dealing with. I mean, it's a very, very difficult balancing job, and if I could take 2 minutes of your time, 10 years ago, a resident had some private work done, a new kitchen, a small extension, some garden refurbishment. The builder would include in his price a skip for the disposal of the waste that generates. What we're finding more and more frequently is that the builder won't provide a skip for the resident to dispose of what is legitimately the industrial or commercial building waste, and says to the resident, well, you can take it to the household waste site. That then puts a huge burden and a huge financial cost on the authority. So part of the reason for the permit scheme is trying to manage the levels and volumes of waste that go through the CRC sites. In no way do we want to turn waste away and see it fly tipped. There are other avenues available for residents to dispose of bulky items, including the bulky waste service, where residents can dispose of up to 5 items for a small charge with our contractors. It's not ideal, and as I said, it's a tight line, to try and manage the resource of the authority in a positive way. I am quite frustrated at times when I see some of the waste that goes into the household waste sites, which a number of years ago would have been managed by the developer, the builder, in relation to the works that they're doing, but those costs are being passported or placed on the authority, and we need to be aware of that and manage that as we move forward. I don't know if that, the access to the tips is restricted in relation to commercial vehicles. A permit is required, but that is widely publicised both on our website and information that we put out. We can look at improving or increasing the level of publicity, but we don't say no. We will operate in accordance with the policy, and the policy does restrict the number of visits that a resident can have, and that's based on some of the findings and the information of waste that is being deposited at the CRC sites, and what historically was managed as part of a build is now finding its way into our waste streams.
Absolutely. Sorry, with your permission, Chair. Absolutely understand that. The last skip I got, which was a couple of weeks ago, was 180 quid.
Yeah.
So we're talking about affordability for some of our residents as well. And clearly the option of hiring a skip for 180 quid or actually tipping it somewhere sends a sort of a clear message. But actually, I was talking about more domestic waste. And I really do understand the balance between accessibility and the present circumstances. But it was just a comment, you know, perhaps, I mean, I don't know, perhaps you'll tell me whether fly tipping has increased since the difficulty of accessing the tips has taken place. I don't.
I don't understand, sorry, and I'm not trying to be awkward, what you mean by the difficulty in accessing the tips, because, you know, since the lifting of lockdown, the tips have been open. We had a clear strategy in the first lockdown of trying to leave the tips open for as long as possible for what we classed as essential journeys. Unfortunately, you know, because people were at home, a number of individuals, you know, carried out, you know, major clearances and major activities, and the police in the end asked us to close the household waste sites, you know, in the first lockdown. That then was enforced with legislation. We opened the tips as soon as we could in a managed way. We didn't publicise the opening of the tips because we didn't want the congestion and the issues that other authorities had faced. We put in place appropriate traffic management. Gateworth was opened initially, that being the largest site and having the largest access. After that, we opened Woolston, and then following Woolston, I think it was around last July, we opened the smaller site at Stockton Heath. All sites have been open, you know, since we were allowed to legitimately by government, and have been open 7 days a week. The volume of waste, the number of visitors going through has increased. I think that reflects the amount of time that people have been at home, but you know, access in appropriate and normal circumstances is not restricted.
No, I understand that. Sorry, that wasn't a criticism of your work, your office, or your organisation.
Sorry, Mike, I didn't take it that way.
No, it wasn't. It was because of the COVID restrictions and impositions put on by government because of the COVID. That was all. I just wondered.
I mean, there was when
go on.
You've muted Ian.
Sorry, schoolboy error, as we say. During the lockdown period, there was an increase in the incidence of fly tipping, unfortunately, because people couldn't access the tip. You know, since the lifting of the lockdown restrictions, you know, fly tipping unfortunately still does occur. You know, whether that can be linked, you know, what is the reason for it? You know, it frustrates both Linda and I greatly, and it is very, very selfish.
No, thanks, and thank you, Chair. Thanks, Nat, and I'm very happy with your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Mike. Does anybody else have any questions for Linda or Ian? Okay, thank you.
Hello, oh, sorry.
Sorry, yes.
I didn't unmute myself quick enough. Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Yeah, it's obviously a really difficult one to solve, and it's about changing people's behaviour, isn't it? I was wondering what percentage of officers' time has been lost when you know, the waste there's been no waste found, and what the costs were, what the percentage of time was with that. And the other thing I was going to mention was there seems to be, we generally seem to have a sort of people in general seem to have a view that out of sight is out of mind. So if you chuck it, it doesn't exist anymore, but obviously we know it does. And if householders are having work done to their properties, it seems to be they have the work done, somebody takes it away, they're not concerned with what happens to it thereafter, and all the emphasis then, they're absolved from any responsibility, basically. Is there a way that we can sort of think about turning this round to sort of make people actually, well, if you're having the work done, it's your responsibility to make sure that the waste coming from your property is disposed of legally in the right way?
Can I pick that up first, Linda? Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think where Linda's referred to is that waste isn't there when officers have gone out. Predominantly that relates to what we would call side waste. So there are several points within the borough where we have what's called multiple bin collections, or where people will leave or unfortunately put side waste next to the bin. So we have a very clear policy that's for a number of reasons. The flat bin lid, occasionally residents potentially will put additional waste next to the bin. That will not be collected by the waste operatives. That's recorded, or should be recorded, by the crews when they are going out. So when the crew goes out down the road, the driver has an onboard computer where we record individual incidents. If there are bags left next to a property and the bin is numbered, that should be recorded on the system. So if somebody is, what we have done, and recognising in some of the improvement works that Linda's talked about before, is we've gone through an exercise where the next day one of my staff members has gone out to visit these areas where additional waste has been left. Sometimes that waste has been managed by the individual residents, which for us is a success. If it has gone, that is a success because the resident has managed the waste themselves. We hope the resident has managed that waste in a positive way and put it in the bin, and we'll wait for their next fortnightly collection. If the waste hasn't gone, the officer has engaged with the resident, reminded them of the bin policy and encouraged them to use appropriate solutions to dispose of that waste, either via the bin or via the CRC site. We don't collect data in relation to the percentage of time that's being spent doing that. We've done it as a trial to try and support and mitigate the problem. So that hopefully answers your question, the first part of your question. The second part of your question for me from remembering is around basically the use of what we would call appropriately authorised waste carriers. And as you said, one of the challenges is engaging and educating residents that they do have our responsibility to ensure that when their waste is picked up or collected, that they are using an appropriate licensed and authorised waste collector, and that that then ensures the waste goes into hopefully the proper disposal systems and doesn't find its way into a country lane or other area that's regularly used from fly tipping. I would love to to publish, and one of the areas that we're looking at is whether there is an opportunity for us to provide a service, but at the same time support or publish appropriately authorised waste collectors via the council's website, so residents know who to go to when they have additional items that require collection. We always signpost and support the bulky waste collection service. That's operated at the moment by the Changing Lives charity. They do a lot of work around reuse. We also, where possible, support and promote the other charitable organisations within Warrington who use and reuse items. And I think moving forward, it would be beneficial if via the council's website we could publish appropriately qualified and licensed waste carriers. However, we need to be careful because of the issue around promotion of businesses and competition and other areas, but it's something I think, Councillor Harris, that we could definitely look at.
Good, thanks very much, Ian. That was very interesting. And I'd just like to say that it's really good to see that you've got some more officers coming on board, which hopefully will, make things a lot easier for you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. I just had a thought that if we have the bin policy in a nice clear format, that we could ask community groups to share and publicise on their social media certainly I can speak for the inner wards and say we would be very happy to do that to help out there. And anything with the tip procedure. Yes, Ian.
And before we finish, Chair, there is one, I think, for me, working in the environment, I have seen a huge change in people's attitudes towards the wider environment during the COVID lockdown. You will know I am very proud of what our service has done in maintaining the look of the borough. I would like to recognise as well what a large proportion or a growing number of the community are doing via the litter networks in supporting us. What we are trying to do is work a lot more closely with the growing number of litter networks to support them in the cleaning that they are doing. If you look at the level of waste that's been collected this year by those networks, it in one way it's unbelievable, in another way it's very disappointing that the waste is there in the first place. But there is, we are turning the tide. We are seeing things improve and change. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it's a bit like turning a tanker, isn't it? And we are slowly getting there. And I think one of the things that we do need to recognise and celebrate is that unbelievable effort of the litter networking and the growing community and the growing responsibility that is starting to come to the forefront in relation to the management of both waste and litter within the wider borough. Sorry, I just, I would like to finish on a positive, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's by the same token, and I'm sure the community would like me to also express their thanks for the support that has come through from the council and the officers in terms of picking up the waste and the systems that have been very quickly put in place to help them to do that job. And I think working together has been, it's been a superb effort. And at the last count, I've not heard in the last couple of days, but something over between 700 and 800 bags of litter have been picked up this year from January. And it's probably more than that now. So, it's a phenomenal effort by the community and also by our officers who have helped them to keep that off the streets, and it's another problem in itself. The only other thing that occurred to me, I was reporting some fly tipping in back end of last year, and I was asked by the person who responded to me to use the What 3 Words app to help with the location, and I mentioned it to a colleague quite recently, and they said, oh, they didn't know about it. So maybe that is something that we could publicise a little more, because I think that's really easy to use, and it's easier to report things, and if that makes life easier for you guys, I think that's publicising it. We're doing as much as we can on that. Yes, Linda.
I was just going to come in on the on that issue exactly, that and just pick a little bit up from what Councillor Harris said about the no waste found, and Ian commented on. There is a reasonable, let's go pre-COVID, there was a reasonable a reasonable level of no waste found. I can't give you the exact statistics because we record things differently to Ian's level, but from an environmental crime point of view, that could be anywhere between 10 to 25%, depending. So what we need to do as things start to get back more to normal is drill down into that to see how we reduce the burden of the officers going out looking and the waste gone, and trying to identify why. Is that because somebody put a bulky waste collection out and so somebody's reported it, but actually it's gone before we've got there? Yeah. Is it that somebody's put it outside because a friend's coming to collect it? We need to understand it a bit more, or if street's gone and taken it already, we need to understand it a bit more. Yeah. In relation to the What 3 Words, it wasn't part of the transformation process in respect of fly tipping. Actually, it is a really, really sensible route forward, but they've gone with pins on maps in relation to transformation. But someone else had mentioned it to me, and I think possibly I'd seen your report, Councillor Farty, and I saw that What 3 Words, and I thought, we need to look at that. So yes, it's on my list.
Excellent. Yeah, because if we can get it out there, whatever it is that you need to help to help, it would be great. And the other, I suppose, the other thing that causes rubbish to disappear would be the scrap man that regularly tours around. And maybe we could do some work with him that we know what days he's going to tour around or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit more tricky, and that's again partly because we're, as Ian alluded to, with the waste transfer individuals, in relation to different ones, there's a number of licensed scrap metal dealers.
Yes,
and it is painful because it feels like the council isn't being flexible over it. I understand, but the difficulty is if we say to Mr. Scrap Metal Man A, there's waste there, or what day do you go? Then B will say, well, you didn't offer me that. So we've got to make sure that we're transparent and
yes, of course,
on paper it sounds easy, but sadly it's not quite as easy.
It's never as easy as you think.
No, it never is.
But I don't think there are any more questions. Just give everybody a moment. No, okay. So thank you very much, Linda and Ian, for that. Very, very informative, and well done with the progress that you've made. It is a difficult and painful journey a lot of the time, but I think you've done really well, and I'm sure the other councillors would agree that we've made good progress, and certainly the streets do look a lot better. We've still got problems, not to say they've not gone away, but definitely things are better than they used to be. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that we move on to item 5, which is the partly the Central 6 Community Forum, which you will remember was formed to support the regeneration plan consultation for the Central 6, but has continued to operate as part of the delivery of those projects, and a plan that they have highlighted regarding small green spaces where communities have taken over areas of abandoned land and turn them into quite nice little community gardens. And we asked for support in looking at those, and Ian, I think, has got some information for us about how that's can be incorporated and developed in the Parks and Green Spaces plans for the borough. Is that right, Ian? Can I hand over to you?
I mean, briefly, Chair, the authority is part of the COVID restart. Is looking at the transport and the road networks around the inner wards and rat running through central wards and other areas. Part of this exercise, and residents and members will have seen that within the town centre there's been some temporary restrictions and changes made following the lift down. What we're doing is we're looking at a wider plan of how improvements and reduction in traffic flows within the inner wards and other areas can be supported by the introduction of smaller parks and woodland areas, and hope to come up with a wider plan that we can share with members moving forward. So there's work being done around the town centre and the greening of the town centre and joining up green walkways and cycleways, and in conjunction with that it's looking at how green spaces can be used in the appropriate areas within other, outlying immediate areas of the town to support both local residents and community groups with the development of those pocket parks and woodland areas. So I've waffled there. I don't know if I've done that very succinctly, but does that answer the question you were asking? Sorry, Chair.
Yes, I think it does. We have certainly the Central 6 Community Forum have identified a number of small spaces, and I know that the other objective is this joining up of green spaces, cycleways and so on. So I think we've got a long way to go on it, but we've certainly got some good foundations and some willingness once again from both sides to work together and develop something very sensible. Would anybody like to ask Ian questions?
I think, sorry, just to interrupt, I think what it is for me, it's about putting the green space in the appropriate area that supports the immediate and wider community that enables us to maintain it and support it in an appropriate way, be it that via third-party volunteer groups and or the authority, and supports the wider traffic calming measures that we're talking about. So that potentially puts things a little bit more succinctly.
Thank you. Yeah, does anybody like to ask Ian anything about the thoughts and the ideas, or contribute any suggestions to this programme of development of green spaces? Sharon?
So yeah, it sounds really positive to me, all of this work. And did I hear that you were sort of thinking of rolling it out wider? Yeah,
obviously, Councillor Harris, you know, there's the wider vision about sharing this across the whole authority, and especially linking it into, you know, part of the woodland initiatives and the tree initiatives. One of the challenges, you know, is identifying the appropriate land and space where either the pocket park or small woodland can go, and ensuring that where these green spaces, if we call them green spaces, are placed, they can be appropriately maintained and adopted, and you know, the future maintenance liability can be managed. I mean, trees are a prime example, and you know, again, linking it to the wider environment discussions we were having before, there's a growing desire to plant trees across the borough, which, you know, we welcome. However, the trees that are planted need to be the right tree in the right place at the right time. And there have been some examples recently where residents who have, you know, had the best intentions have placed trees or planted trees in what can only be described as, you know, inappropriate places. We had trees planted over a main gas pipeline, you know, within the town that we then had to go and remove. So again, it's trying to work with both community groups and wider organisations to manage the green space in a positive and appropriate place, and coming up with some support so we understand what we're planting, when we're planting it, and how, more importantly, it is going to be maintained moving forward, because the future maintenance liability is one of the biggest challenges that we have. It's not necessarily the planting of the sapling, it's the management of the green space longer term, and that, you know, that is where we need to put some of our work and some of our efforts.
Thank you. I've got a couple of places possibly in mind, but they're probably completely inappropriate. So I'll talk to you another time.
I mean, and you know, there are a number of initiatives, and you know, it is a growing. There is a groundswell of desire to plant trees and, you know, improve the greenways within the town. I welcome that. You know, I want to, again, it's my challenge is working, you know, with the volunteer groups so we can do it in a planned and strategic way, so it benefits everybody, and we're not undoing each other's good work. For, you know, is probably the appropriate and politest way of saying things.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Graham.
A comment, really, a problem. I've known what you said about sustaining it, keeping it going, really rings bells, because I've known quite a few groups in the area that start off supporting some project like this with great enthusiasm. But the people, especially if they're already retired before they start, the people get old, and actually getting new people to come along and the continuity is really very difficult. And it actually needs, the fact of the need of doing this needs to be taken on board really right from the start, rather than people assuming that they're going to go on forever and never get old and tired. It does seem to be a problem.
Yeah, I think I understand completely what you're talking about, Councillor Grimes, and it's that continuity planning, and it's the authority's role is changing, you know, and unfortunately, as everybody's aware, our resource levels are becoming more and more scarce. For me, it's about working in a different way, working with the community so we can deliver the maximum benefit for the residents with the combined resource that we've got. If that, you know, is that volunteer resource, you know, such as litter networks, tree planting groups, other community groups who will help and support with the maintenance of some of the pocket parks and some of the areas. You know, it is a challenge that we need to meet head on, and it's about, you know, I see one of the authority's roles is around supporting the groups to help plan and achieve that long-term deliverability, and not just a 12-month project, you know, and how can we maintain that momentum, and how can we plan for the future? And, you know, so with the greatest respect, when people do step away and step down, that the projects continue, and that you know, the good work is continued.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of the authority doing more support, just that from the very beginning, when things start off, this sort of planning needs to be built in. The people who take up the project, who start the project with such enthusiasm, need to be prompted right at the start that this needs to be part of the setup.
Yeah. I mean, apologies, you know, I see us as a supportive role, and as you say, you know, if we can come up with, I understand completely what it's about, that developing partnership between the volunteer groups and the authority.
If I can come in on that, because it struck a chord with me, what Councillor Grime has just said, because 10 years ago I passed a comment when we were in St Elphin's Park that it would be very nice if we could have a cup of coffee and use the toilet while we were in the park. And 10 years later on, I am now running, when it's open, a coffee shop in the park and cleaning those very toilets. So, and, you know, it was said to us at the time about, you know, well, you know, these groups start off enthusiastically, and then you know, people get old and stuff, and I totally understand that. And all my working life I've come across this problem of the old guard staying there doing what they do, never will they change, never will they let anybody else on board, and then suddenly they can't do it anymore, and that's the end. But we said, well, we might have the park nice for 2 years, and we've had it nice for 10 years. We've had great support from the Parks and Gardens team. If they've not been able to do what we've asked, they've tried to find ways to help us to achieve what we've wanted to do. And just before COVID, we were finally getting to the stage where we had a network of much younger volunteers joining us and joining in, and hopefully, because they have been very supportive of us through all this lockdown, they will be coming back, and I hope the other groups have had similar experiences. The Friends of Friends network that we started 5 or 6 years ago, that brings all the friends groups together, does try to address that problem as well. And the friends groups have then had a method of helping each other through difficult things. If, for instance, we had travellers on St Elphin's Park a couple of years ago, and the staff came along and did an excellent clean-up job, but 2 of the other friends groups just turned up the next day and said, right, you know, we're here with litter pickers, what do you need us to do? And so that building of networks has been fantastic, and I think it's just coming to fruition now, but it has taken a long time. So we do need to be aware of it, and thank you for raising it. and we need to raise it with all those groups. But I think it is important that the community realise that responsibility and help to keep their own environment up to standard.
Councillor Flaherty?
Yes, Councillor Wright.
I'm struggling, hang on a minute. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's difficult. First time I tried using the phone. I've not seen any of the presentations because I can't see them, but just picking up on a couple of things that have gone on.
Yeah.
And Ian's just referenced it there. It's a matter of resource. And obviously the impact of the cuts over the past 10 years must be having an impact on the delivery of these services.
Yeah.
And really we should be making sure that we get the investment that's required. I think the idea of that in the parks, you know, pocket parks and things like that, is an excellent idea. And I think it's important that when residents think that these are good ideas and they know they're good ideas, we should be able to get the support to, you know, to ensure that these things happen. There's a case today where a young girl died and partly attributed to poor air quality in London. You know, so it's an important thing, and having fresh air and being able to spend time outside is important, and it's you know, for health and well-being. And so I think Ian mentioned that well, I'll ask Ian, has the cut in resource had a bad impact on what we can do going forward, or are we sort of managing a decline? Because it's all well and good getting volunteers involved, and there's a great number of volunteers doing great work, and that's good. But as a local authority, are we not as able to do what we used to do because of the government cuts, if you like? That's a question for Ian, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple answer is over a period of years there has been a direct reduction in the level of resource within the service. Where our challenge comes from is trying to deliver to the same level or a greater extent with a reducing resource base, and looking at how we work in partnership with the volunteer groups and other organisations that are around. I mean, you know, we talked earlier on about the litter networks and what the litter networks have collected. The litter networks over the Warrington Borough have collected in excess of 1,651 bags of litter to date. If the litter networks hadn't have collected that, my staff would have been expected to collect it. The simple fact is I haven't got the resource to go out and collect that amount of litter, and some of the areas that the volunteers and the litter network are collected. I see our role, you know, to answer your question, Councillor Wright. I am passionate about the environment. I'm passionate about defending my services and trying to maximise the available resource to our services. I think one of the challenges I have is trying to think outside the box about how we can increase the level of resource that comes in, whether that is becoming and some of the work that we've talked about this evening, you know, charging individuals, not necessarily residents, but businesses and other organisations for services that we provide, that then brings in income to the service that I can redirect to the frontline service provision, has got to be the way forward, because, you know, the service cannot sustain any real further reduction in resource and maintain its current position.
Thank you,
Ian.
Thank you, Ian. I think.
Yes.
Thank you for that answer. I think. Can I come in?
Yes, Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Biggin.
Yeah, I think the point I'm making is that there has been a decline in funding available to us, and we as a council have had to be really clever and creative about how we sort of backfill those gaps, and it's a credit to the service that we've been able to do that. And yeah, I know I've been involved in the litter picks, and I know that that's a great way of getting the community involved and taking responsibility and stuff, and that's not a problem. But it's just a point that, you know, with the limited resource, we have to be even more clever and think outside the box as to how we can sort of deal with these situations, the fly tipping and the green spaces, and having a more cooperative way of looking at how we do things is certainly part of the answer. But it does come down to pounds, shillings and pence at times, and we should be making sure that we maximise our bang for buck. You're right, getting resource from where we can and do what we can best with what we've got. So I'm not criticising the service. I'm just saying it's not being made any easier for us, and we've had to contend with, you know, all these changes to the way we deliver stuff because of the way the funding's been cut from us. But yeah, so it's great that the volunteers do what they do, and it's great that we're supporting them. And we need to keep thinking about how best we do that, and any ideas we've got to make sure it happens. But I do think the idea of greening up the town centre is a really good idea. You know, with a lot of development going on, we need to ensure that we get some oases amongst the developments and green space for people to enjoy. So I look forward to hopefully playing a part in that in the future, making sure that we get a good balance. I think that's the key, a good balance for our residents.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Biggin, did you?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Steve. I mean, perhaps I'm going to answer your question. I know you understand that in Grapnel we don't have a lot of green space, but it is a very diverse borough, and various areas of the borough can deal with it in different ways. Just to give Grapnel and Thirlwall as an exemplar, we hired about 10 years ago a village warden. No, all right, I can understand those areas without parish councils can't do that, and all I'm doing is giving you an example of how it's working for us. The fantastic Borough Council works very closely with our parish warden. We've got him provided with a truck so he can go around maintaining our green spaces in cooperation, in structured cooperation with the Borough Council officers as well. And it's a model which actually has worked so well. And I know it's saved the Borough Council a lot of money in terms of the fact that our village warden does stuff which the Borough Council are used to, and we're gradually forming this relationship whereby areas are being much better looked after than they would be had we just left it in the way it was. So my suggestion is really, in at least the parish councils, the parish areas, a system like that could be built up to save help some of the burden on the Borough Council, which would give the Borough Council officers a chance to deal with the inner wards, the unparished wards I'm talking about, which don't have those resources. I know David Boy has been involved in the development of that project, so I thank David as well.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, does anybody else have any more comments on these ideas and or suggestions? Okay, I think that I fully understand Councillor Wright's comments about the reducing resources. I think the team have done miraculous work with the funds that are available and resources that are available to them, and to carry on to the standards that they have. But money aside, I do think we also have to recognise the value of the volunteering to individuals, giving them a purpose and a pride in their place where they live. So there's a knock-on effect that isn't related to money really as well. But well done to everybody for the work on that, and thank you for the suggestions. And I'm sure there's a lot more to come on this project as we go forward over the years, to develop these nice green spaces and to keep our town nice and green. You do notice when you drive through how many trees and things there are, parks and green spaces, especially if you go and visit other towns. We are very lucky. So thank you very much. Thank you, Ian. Oh, that was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to our work programme. I think, make sure I've not missed anything. And we are, of course, at the last meeting of this administration. So we have covered most of the things, everything I think that we originally had on the plan despite COVID. The only thing I think that was still outstanding was the service design work group, which was about the customer facing work for the council, and the new website. Obviously that has gone live and it's very good. So in the new after the elections we should get some update on that, and we will compile a new work programme. So I guess what we need to do is for all of us who are hoping to return or returning after the election, to put our thinking caps on so that we've got some good ideas for this committee in the future to make a big difference to our town, which I think tonight we've seen some of the things where the community can make a big difference, and this is what we need to do, is to get the community involved in supporting our officers and making sure we all work together. So I think, unless anybody's got any comments on the work programme, that brings us to the end of our meeting and of this administration. So all remains for me to do is to say thank you very much for putting up with me as your chair for the last 5 years, as it happens, and I hope, I wish everybody good luck if they're standing again in the election, and hope that those that are leaving us and retiring, I wish you a very pleasant retirement and enjoy. I hope that it isn't the last that we see of you. I do hope that we'll see you on social occasions and things like that. So thank you very much for all your support, and I look forward to seeing you all again after May the 6th. Good luck, everybody, and good night.
Right, and thank you, Jean,
night,
being an excellent chair. It's been great.
Very good, thank you.
Good night.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Steve.
Bye.
Bye-bye.